Mouthwashing is an indie first-person psychological horror game following the story of the stranded crew of the Tulpor, a deep space bulk freighter, after a collision leaves them stranded on an asteroid in deep space with dwindling resources and no help on the way. Mouthwashing is maybe the darkest game I've ever played. I know what you're thinking, mouthwashing? What could possibly be so dark and disturbing about a game with the oh-so-threatening name of mouthwashing? It turns out, pretty much everything. Mouthwashing is a character study of what happens to different flawed people when left in an environment of isolation, paranoia and hopelessness for long enough, how each of them go mad in their own way, and how that madness drives them to become the worst version of themselves. Just a warning, sub-segments of this video may trigger epilepsy, including the end of this intro, so be aware if you're susceptible to that. Second, Mouthwashing depicts some extremely dark subjects and themes: murder, sexual assault, cannibalism and torture, so if any of that sounds a bit heavy, I fully understand, maybe I'll see you again. But anyone else who wants to go on Mouthwashing's wild ride, stick around and see how deep this fucked up rabbit hole goes. This video is going to be a little bit different from what I usually do. Rather than this being a review, it's more of a summary. I'll only be briefly touching on its gameplay and its presentation beyond this point, as both are quite simple and mostly take a backseat to the story being told. The gameplay is a lot of walking, talking and interaction. The presentation is simple but effective. The music is honestly the best part of it. It's fantastic, very moody a lot of the time, but also pretty frequently beautiful. Graphics are low poly and pixelated, and it gives a very distinctive, unsettling vibe. It's quite a popular style in indie horror in general. What's not as common is the story as well written and complex as Mouthwashing's. Mouthwashing is hard to follow by design. The plot structure is pretty unique and follows two separate threads before and after the crash. Throw in hallucinations, delusions and nightmares, and keeping track of this caper can be a challenge. Mouthwashing is at its core a mystery. Who crashed the ship, and why did they crash the ship? We play from the point of view of one of the crew, who purposely steers the ship towards an asteroid before deactivating the autopilot so the collision can't be corrected, fleeing the cockpit into the ship after the deed's done, sprinting through the halls to the sound of a baby crying, before running into a strange and slightly unnerving pony mascot, the source of the noise, before we fade to white. We pick up 2 months after the crash and get to know the crew: Anya, Swansea, Daisuke and Curly. We play as Jimmy in any of the sections after the crash, and Curly in any before the crash. Jimmy is the acting captain after the previous captain Curly crashed the Tulpor intending to kill himself and the crew, surviving but maimed and disfigured and unable to speak. The crew is understandably getting desperate at this point because the ship only has 4 months of supply left, and the crew want to know what's in the cargo hold to see if what they're hauling could help them repair the ship or call for help. But as acting captain, only we can authorise access to the cargo hold using the code scanner. But on our way to get it, we can learn a wee bit about the crew. Daisuke is an intern under the ship's mechanic, Swansea, who wants to keep him as far out of his way as possible. Swansea's a no-nonsense company man who lives for his work. He's been trying to get back into utility where much of the ship's vital equipment is, but during the crash, the section's hull was breached, and protective foam prevents entry. And due to the risks of a hull breach that comes with trying to clear the foam, Swansea lets no one else in to help. Anya is the ship's nurse, and isn't thought of particularly highly by either Jimmy or Swansea. Absent-minded and jittery, incapable of performing her role on the ship, leaving even simple tasks like giving painkillers to the horribly maimed Curly to Jimmy. Jimmy stepped up to the captain's role to replace Curly, but it definitely seems to be starting to weigh on him, having to take on that responsibility while also doing pretty much everything else around the ship. But let's fast forward a bit, we get the code scanner and open the cargo hold. But before we see what's inside, we cut back 7 days before the crash, now in Curly's shoes, who's in the middle of a Psycheval. Anya can't get Jimmy to take his seriously, so sends the captain to chase up after him. We find Jimmy in utility, which is where the crew's cryostasis pods are held. Jimmy agrees to an eval, but only in private, so we go to meet Jimmy in the cockpit. But as will become a running trend from this point in, things get weird. We drop into this red lake filled with ladders and emergency warnings as the sun rises towards the lake before fading to white. I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me like this is Curly's nightmares bleeding into his memories as a way of interpreting the crash. But back in the real world, and after Jimmy's psych eval, we learn a bit more about the two men. Curly's suffering from a kind of midlife crisis. He's reached the top of the corporate ladder, he's a good captain, but it's not fulfilling him in life, and he's thinking of taking a chance on something new. Jimmy was dealt a bad hand back on Earth, so from the bottom of the ladder looking up, he can't help but be a bit envious of Curly. The scene transitions again as we read a message we received from corporate. We're in a dark cargo hold, stacked high with boxes and a mess of text which we can't read. We find a TV in the back, and on one of the channels an ad for mouthwash, which brings us back to the actual cargo hold, which, shocker to absolutely no one, is filled with mouthwash, but with 14% ethanol, so it's pretty much booze. And Swansea takes to it like a fish to water, giving up 15 years of sobriety and a heartbeat, which totally won't become an issue in the not so distant future. 6 days before the crash, during a birthday celebration, we break the news to the crew. Pony Express just went under, so after this haul they're out of a job, which leaves all but Curly high and dry with no prospects. Anya never got into medical school, and this was the only position she could get. Swansea's nearing the end of his career and doesn't seem to have anything but work to do. Daisuke is mostly alright, his family will keep him, and Jimmy goes back to his struggle of a life. He was a bit envious before, but now he's flat out jealous of Curly, throwing all sort of accusations around, but mainly that he got what he wanted while the rest of the crew are left in the dirt, and that really it isn't his life as a captain that he's trying to escape, but the crew. We take a knife and cut the cake. 3 months after the crash, we wake and look for Anya. We find her in the cockpit speaking with Swansea. She's been crying. Swansea seems a little confrontational with Jimmy and is taken to carrying a fire axe around the ship with him. Anya yet again wants us to give Curly his meds. The responsibility's really starting to weigh on Jimmy now, and he started to become paranoid of the crew. How they look at him, what they're thinking, what would he say, what would she do. More on that later. I'm going to summarise a few of the upcoming sections because not a massive amount actually happens. Jimmy's clearly falling into delusion at this point, hallucinating talking with Curly. We see the cake again. Curly wants us to get a knife to cut it. We get an axe and swing it at him instead. 4 months after the crash, supplies of medicine are nearly out. There is some spare medicine in the depot locker, but we would need an axe to cut through all the foam to even get to it. Swansea refuses to give us his, thinking that we're going to use it to kill everyone. He does ultimately give it up with some convincing, but it's pretty clear to see that the booze has made him way more paranoid and aggressive. Anya again wants Jimmy to give Curly his meds. Jimmy snaps at her this time though, claiming that he has to do everything around the ship before sending her to check in on Daisuke, who last time we seen him was in the middle of a drink-fueled mental breakdown. And as we're giving Curly his meds, Jimmy utters those fateful words, "Our worst moments don't make us monsters." And from here on in, everything goes to shit. 6 hours until judgment. We're in the cockpit. We interact with the door. We lock it. Swansea's trying to break it down. We scramble to get something to hold the door. A rope, a broken pipe. Something real bad has happened. But before we can figure out what, Swansea breaks through the glass with his axe. Back with Curly 2 days before the crash. We're chatting with Anya. Neither can sleep, so they both find refuge at the window screen. But there's an odd undertone to this conversation. She asks how long's left of the voyage, which is a reasonable enough question in isolation, apparently a little under 8 months, but then asks straight after why Pony Express puts locks on the medical room door but not on the sleeping quarters. According to Curly, it was for the same reason as the cockpit. Safety. These questions are strange. They have no real relation to each other. What reason would she possibly have for asking these things? Sadly, as we'll find out shortly, there's a tragic logic to these questions. 5 months after the crash, a panicked Daisuke runs into the lounge to tell us. Anya took what Jimmy said previously to heart, taking matters into her own hands. She's locked herself in with Curly, and the crew can't get the door open. She claims Jimmy was right all along, that she should have done it from the beginning, that their worst moments don't define them, don't make them beyond repair. But this wasn't her worst moment. It's the best decision she'll ever make, and she would take care of it. Fearing Anya's gonna kill Curly, Daisuke and Jimmy have to find a way into medical, and the only way to do that is through an emergency vent and utility, which Swansea won't let us into. 8 hours before judgment, Daisuke is badly injured. How, we don't know, but Swansea's livid, demanding we find Disinfectant to help treat the wound. Jimmy tries to pin the blame of what happened on Swansea, but Swansea has none of it, storming out of the room. If we happen to follow him into medical, we find half the room has been blurred out. Something bad happened in here, real bad. Bad enough Jimmy can't even see it. It's like his mind won't allow him to. While looking for Disinfectant, we end up outside the cargo hold, but you'll notice something pretty odd in front of it, a gravestone with a flower beside it. If we use our code scanner on the gravestone, it reveals a hidden path into this surreal Escher-esque version of the cargo hold, which will take us to a catwalk. Something's in the boxes below us, make too much noise, whatever it is finds us, sending us back to the start. But if you play your cards right, you'll get a little peek at what's been hunting you, this distorted horse creature that's been hanging down from the ceiling. What the fuck does this mean? We'll get to that later, but for now we just need to get past it. Reaching the Pony Express mascot Polle, who has our Disinfectant, or rather Mouthwash. And we're back with Daisuke. We try to dull his pain with the mouthwash, but he blames himself for his injury. 5 months after the crash, we're trying to get into utility and can't get past Swansea, so Daisuke and Jimmy hatch a plan. So we put together a cocktail with a little added kick for him, but when we're giving it to him, he's pretty hard on Daisuke. Wondering why an idiot like him was even allowed on board, what could he possibly learn? What would he accomplish other than becoming older, uglier, meaner with every mistake? This last bit is pure projection on Swansea's part. This is how he sees himself, how he turned out, and assumes that because Daisuke's here with them, that he'll turn out the same way. Swansea so far has given me the impression of a completely miserable man, though it isn't clear why yet. I don't think he likes his life very much. But with his little rant over, he takes a sip of his cocktail, and he goes down, allowing us into utility, which it turns out wasn't filled with foam after all. Swansea lied, keeping everyone in the dark about his true plan, and not allowing anyone into utility that could stop him. He's been biding his time for the crew to start turning on each other, and then when shit finally hits the fan, he's gonna write it out in the last functioning cryopod, which will give him 20 more years to be discovered and rescued. But for now, they had to rescue Curly from Anya. The ceiling vent is heavily damaged though, and Daisuke is the only one that can fit in apparently. He's apprehensive at doing something so dangerous, but Jimmy manipulates Daisuke into doing what he wants. Daisuke gave me the sense of someone who was a bit impressionable, and Jimmy preys on that, saying that Swansea would be proud if he does it, and then when he's still a bit apprehensive, he pulls rank on him, ordering him to do it for the good of the crew. He reluctantly agrees, but ends up getting injured on the way to medical, where he sees what Anya has done. This whole interaction shows something that's becoming clearer and clearer as the game has went on. Jimmy is not a good guy. He's jealous, manipulative, and narcissistic, but unfortunately his worst trait is yet to come. One day before the crash, our sidearm is missing and we need to find it. When we're looking for it, we find Anya in the cockpit. Curly thinks she's taken it and she's going to use it to hurt herself because they were let go, but she couldn't open the case even if she wanted to hurt herself, so instead she hid it. Jimmy had forced himself on her, and now she was pregnant, which would explain a lot about the conversation Curly and her had earlier. She hid the gun away not from the captain, but from Jimmy, as the captain would have never allowed her to have the gun to defend herself. Jimmy could never have been allowed to get it either. 6 hours until judgment. Daisuke's condition is worsened, so Swansea cracks a little, showing Daisuke had had more of an effect on the old man than he let on. A useless ray of sunshine, no ace student, career workhorse or force of ambition, but a good kid trying his best, and he could have taught someone like Swansea, who was set in his ways a lot. He tells him to close his eyes and brings down the axe and kills him. Jimmy calls him monster, that he could have fixed him like he did with everything else, not realising how hypocritical it all sounds. But Swansea knows the truth about Jimmy, about what he is, and claims that by killing Daisuke in a way he was freeing him from the mess Jimmy had left them all in. Get the gun. We find the gun case in medical, but we need a code to get it open. Anya's gone, overdosed on painkillers, but Curly's still alive. Anya wasn't trying to kill Curly at all, rather she dealt with what Jimmy had did to her, and in the process ended her own life. Curly was powerless to stop her, and it broke his mind. He launches into a fit of laughing and crying as we open the box and get our gun. As we leave the room, Swansea charges us with his axe. We draw our gun to fire. 0 days before the crash, Anya confronted Jimmy without Curly. She understandably doesn't want Jimmy on the ship anymore. Fearing what Jimmy will do now and trying to keep it together, Curly rushes to find him, reaching him outside the cockpit. Jimmy says they're finished, both of them. Everything they've accomplished won't matter when they land. After what he's done, they'll be disgraced. Curly tries to compromise that they'll work through it, but Jimmy pins the blame on Curly. He was supposed to have it all under control. It was his responsibility that all this happened as captain. For the rest of his life he'll bear that shame, unless it's all remembered as a tragedy. Despite his best efforts, the tulpor was never found, presumed destroyed, and the truth of what happened forgotten with no one left to tell it. Jimmy says he'll take care of it, heading to the cockpit, and Curly lets him go. But he changes his mind, unfortunately too late, reaching the cockpit as the ship crashes, being maimed and disfigured in the crash and bearing the blame. 1 hour before judgment, Jimmy's sick and twisted side is on full display. He carries Curly to the lounge table, setting him down, joined by the remains of the crew, who he hallucinates as still alive, though still in the state they were or would be when they died, praising him as captain and wishing him a happy birthday. In place of the cake, Curly. A lot of people struggle to put food on the table. Curly looked down on them for how they lived, but they forgive him. Jimmy believes in him, even now. They'll make it through this. Let's eat. We're in a black void, a door to medical, a hole in the floor, leading us to vents. We reach a window, no turning back now. Back in the halls of the tulpor, its layout warped. we come across Swansea. We take the gun and shoot him in the head. We're in a graveyard. He stalks us. We shoot him in the head. We shoot him in the head. We shoot him in the head. We're back on the Tulpor. Swansea was an alcoholic. 13 years of his life wasted away on booze. When in a moment of sobriety he saw where he would end up and why. Bloated in a ditch, the booze finally killing him. And it changed him. He got a mortgage, a job, a credit card, a family, kids. He could raise them to be better than him. He buried himself in his work, the company man, his new persona, thinking that one mistake wouldn't doom him to become the worst version of himself again. But the truth was that worst version of himself, spinning out drunk on the sofa, his hands rent by broken glass, nauseous, vomiting, the only problem in the world, an empty bottle. Those were the best days of his life. You can tell it sounds ridiculous. Even to him, he has nothing left to hide. He knows what and who he is, and he mocks Jimmy, still blind to his own true colours. His only regret, he couldn't save Daisuke, give him a chance to live. But even now, Jimmy will set it right. He'll fix it. He shoots him in the head. But Swansea in the end did more harm to Jimmy with his words than he ever did with his acts. Swansea shattered Jimmy's self-perception. The misunderstood, tragic hero who stepped up to the plate, trying his best in a bad situation. Jimmy, deep down, underneath the delusion and all the theatrics, he knew it was a lie. The actions he's taken contradict it. Assaulting Anya, tearing down and brutalising Curly out of sheer jealousy. It's not what a hero does. What was once a man so sure of his rightness is now a mess, unable to resolve the difference between the truth and the mask he wears anymore. And in its place, guilt. Guilt which he can't ignore, can't wave away. In the back of his mind, it's always there. He has to finally face it. The truth. Tie up loose ends. We emerge out of a giant fleshy cave, which it turns out is just a massive version of Curly's throat, into a void. In the distance, Curly's strung up to a machine. In front of him is a TV. There's a cartoon on it, and if we watch it, we'll see a character carrying a cake, but it freezes, and we get a prompt, take Curly's leg. We adjust some valves and feed Curly's leg to him. When we turn around again, we're in space. We reach Curly. He wants to go home, and this is what finally breaks Jimmy. He can't accept the delusion anymore, no matter what this imaginary Curly says. While he still makes excuses for his actions, he finally takes responsibility for them. He was sorry, and in these brief moments of lucidity he would set it right. We return to the vents and stumble on a strange fleshy growth. There's a CT scanner beside it, and when we scan the growth, we'll see horses running inside of it, and eventually a baby. And after, a centipede made of Polle mascots bursts out of the growth and chases after us through the vents, but we will eventually escape, walking through a wall of identity cards of the crew and coming upon a Polle. Polle and horses appear throughout the game and are pretty heavily symbolic. My interpretation of them was that they were some sort of mental reminder of what he did to Anya, appearing monstrous as something he needed to hide or escape from because he couldn't or wouldn't live with the reality of what he had done. Polle in this particular scene is that guilt confronting him, using Jimmy's own coping mechanisms against him, and it questions Jimmy's motives, whether he is truly sorry, whether he really means it, or was he still just caged and misunderstood. But Jimmy claims he was sorry, he fucked up, but could set it right. But Polle leaves a question hanging in the air. Why was Jimmy so concerned with saving Curly? What was he doing it for? Because he truly wanted to set things right? Or because he wanted to be the hero, in his mind absolving himself of everything that he had done? 0 hours before judgment, we carry Curly past the dead crew, through the halls of the Tulpor to utility, placing him in the last cryopod. As our perspective shifts for the final time, back to Curly, Jimmy says he was just trying to save them both, but hurt him in the process. But Curly would survive. Together as a team they could fix anything, and he was proud to have been Curly's friend, and that in the end, they fixed it. He fixed it. As the pod starts to freeze, we hear a gunshot, and with that, we roll credits. Curly left alone, perhaps never to be found, and Jimmy, even at the end, still the hero in his own mind. Mouthwashing is one of the most disturbing games I've ever played. It's horrifying in such a real, visceral way, showing the world through the eyes of a warped, evil person who will do anything to escape what he's done. It depicts some extremely dark subject matter in such a nauseatingly uncomfortable way, and generally has some of the most shocking moments out of any horror game I've ever played. Mouthwashing was not a game I strictly enjoyed. It was more of an experience, driven on not by the gameplay or by the visuals, but by morbid curiosity. Just what are they going to do next? How deep and dark is this rabbit hole going to go? But I think we'll wrap it up there. This was a bit different from my usual thing, so hopefully you enjoyed. And if you did, like, comment and subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Happy Halloween, and cheerio.